Woman found cocoon in shed. What hatched made her flee the property. A woman returned from her holiday to find a massive, pulsating cocoon in her shed. She set up a camera to see what was inside, but when it finally hatched, the discovery was so shocking, she abandoned her home and fled the property screaming. What could possibly have been inside? The truth is more terrifying than you can imagine. But before we start our story, make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already, and hit that notifications bell so you won't miss any of our new stories. Sarah Jenkins needed this vacation, 2 weeks of sun and sand with her husband and 2 young kids. It was a perfect escape from the deadlines and the school runs. She returned home feeling relaxed, recharged, ready to face the gentle chaos of suburban life again. The house was exactly as they'd left it, peaceful, safe, but the peace was about to be shattered. The next morning, Sarah decided to do some light gardening. She slipped on her shoes and walked across the freshly cut lawn to her backyard shed. It was a simple wooden structure. It smelled of old soil, rusted metal, and dry wood. A place for lawnmowers, forgotten toys, and gardening tools. In the back corner, hanging from the wooden rafters, was something impossible. It was a cocoon, but it was huge. It was nearly 3 feet long. Its skin was a mottled, grayish-brown. Sarah froze. Her mind raced, trying to process what she was seeing. What is that? She thought. Is it a hive? Some kind of fungus? It looked alien. Unnatural. This thing did not belong here. It did not belong anywhere on Earth. She slowly backed out of the shed. She shut the door, her heart hammering in her chest. She needed a second opinion. She needed someone who wouldn't think she was crazy. She immediately thought of her next-door neighbor, Mark. Mark was a high school science teacher, but his real passion was entomology, the study of insects. His garage was a museum of strange bugs and scientific equipment. If anyone could identify this thing, it was him. She called him, her voice trembling slightly. "Mark, it's Sarah. Can you come over? There's something in my shed you need to see." Mark arrived a few minutes later, a look of cheerful curiosity on his face. Mark fell silent. He peered into the darkness, his eyes adjusting. His jaw slowly dropped. "Whoa," he whispered. "Okay, that is not something you see every day." He was no longer the cheerful neighbor. He was the scientist. He cautiously stepped inside, pulling a powerful flashlight from his pocket. Mark spent the next 20 minutes examining it, taking pictures with his phone and making notes. "I can't identify it, Sarah, but I have an idea." He ran back to his garage and returned with a strange-looking device. It was a handheld thermal imaging camera. "Let's see what's going on inside," he said. He pointed the camera at the cocoon. They both stared at the small color screen. Sarah had expected to see a single, large heat signature, a big larva maybe, but that's not what they saw. It was a colony. There wasn't one creature in there. There were many. "My God," Sarah whispered. "What does that mean?" "It means it's a nest," Mark said, his scientific curiosity now clearly mixed with alarm. He had another idea. He went back to his house and returned with a small, motion-activated trail camera, the kind hunters use to spot deer. They carefully mounted it on a shelf opposite the cocoon, ensuring a clear view. They ran a cable out from under the shed door and connected it to a small monitor inside Sarah's kitchen. Now they could watch it safely. They had a live feed of the monster in the shed. They could see it on a screen from the comfort of her home. The waiting began. For 2 days, nothing happened. The image on the monitor was still. The cocoon just hung there. Sarah found herself unable to relax. Every creak of the house made her jump. "What's growing in there?" she thought constantly. "What's waiting to get out, just feet from where my children play?" The alert came late on Thursday evening. Sarah was in the living room, trying to watch a movie. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, a notification from the camera app. Motion detected. Her blood ran cold. She grabbed the phone, her hands shaking. She opened the live feed. The image was no longer still. The cocoon was shaking violently, convulsing. A dark, wet seam began to split down the middle. It was happening. It was hatching. She watched, mesmerized by a mixture of terror and morbid curiosity. The tear in the leathery skin widened. A thick, dark liquid began to drip onto the shed floor. She watched the screen, unable to look away. Her breath caught in her throat. A thick, writhing river of small, dark bodies began pouring from the split in the cocoon. Sarah's mind finally recognized the shape. A bat. And then she saw another and another. The floor was covered in them, hundreds of them, a living, squeaking tide of bats flooding her shed. It was a nightmare. It was a wave of filth and disease unleashed in her backyard. A primal, instinctual revulsion took over. She dropped the phone on the floor, grabbed her car keys, and ran out of her house. She didn't stop until she was in her car, locking the doors, her heart pounding as she sped away from the horror that had just been born in her backyard. The next morning, Sarah sat in Mark's kitchen, a cup of untouched coffee in her hands. She had not slept. She refused to go back to her house. Mark had been the one to make the call. He called animal control, his voice losing its scientific excitement and taking on a tone of serious concern. 2 hours later, a van pulled up. A woman in a calm professional uniform named Officer Davis met them in the driveway. Sarah explained the story, her voice still shaking. The giant cocoon, the camera feed, the horrifying flood of bats. Officer Davis listened patiently, her expression unreadable. She walked to the shed, opened the door, and shined a powerful flashlight inside. The bats were still there. Most were now clinging to the rafters and the walls, a shifting, murmuring blanket of dark fur. "Well," Officer Davis said, turning back to them, "I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never seen a roost this large." She explained what they were looking at. It was an enormous nursery colony of spotted bats, a species rarely seen in the region. "Your shed was the perfect spot," she explained. "Dark, quiet, and undisturbed for the 2 weeks you were on vacation." The explanation made Sarah feel sick, but a small wave of relief washed over her. They were just bats. Maybe she had overreacted. "So you can just get them out?" Sarah asked hopefully. "We can, yes," Officer Davis said. "But there's a protocol we have to follow first. With a colony this unusual, we need to test for disease, specifically rabies." The animal control team worked for hours. They were professionals, wearing thick gloves and masks. They carefully captured several of the bats for testing and began the process of encouraging the rest of the colony to leave the shed. They left traps and sealed any potential re-entry points. But the real wait had just begun. The wait for the test results. 2 days later, the call came. It was Officer Davis. Mark and Sarah listened on speakerphone. "I have the lab results back," she said, her voice flat and serious. "We tested 20 bats from the colony, and I'm very sorry to have to tell you this, but 18 of them tested positive for the rabies virus." Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her. 18 out of 20, a 90% infection rate. The true horror of the situation was finally clear. The shock wasn't just the disgusting sight of the hatching. The real shock was the invisible danger, the deadly virus that had been multiplying just yards from her home. Her children played in that backyard every day. Their family dog often sniffed around the shed door. What if one of them had been bitten? What if the dog had contracted it? The what-ifs were a special kind of terror. Her scream, her flight, it hadn't been an overreaction. It had been an instinct. Her subconscious had understood the danger before her logical mind ever could. Her home was now considered a biohazard zone. A professional decontamination team had to be called in. They arrived in full hazmat suits, looking like astronauts exploring a hostile planet. The entire shed and the surrounding area had to be sprayed, every surface scrubbed, every tool sterilized. The shed, once a place of simple weekend chores, was now a sealed, forbidden place. A monument to the hidden danger that had been lurking in the shadows. Sarah and her family were eventually able to return home. But things were different. The sense of safety was gone. She would find herself staring out the kitchen window at the shed. The memory of the writhing mass on the monitor burned into her mind. She had been lucky, incredibly lucky, but she would never forget the lesson she had learned, that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not the ones you can see. They are the ones that are invisible, silent, and waiting patiently in the most ordinary places.